Hi everyone, welcome to section 4.2. We are going to be completing the square today. So it is a method. If you came from 10 academic, this should be no problem. You've seen it before. If you came from the 10 applied, this will be totally new. Don't worry about it. Take small baby steps for everyone, and we should be able to get through this no problem. All right, so remember in chapter 3, we looked at the standard and factored forms. This chapter, we're going to be focusing on the vertex form, which is up here, and your standard form. Yesterday, we looked at expanding this and getting it to the standard form. And today, what we're doing is figuring out how to go from standard form all the way back up to vertex form. Now, there's more than one way to do this, but today we're going to focus on a method called completing the square. So that's what we're looking at today. Before we can actually learn how to complete the square, we've got to remember something from earlier in the year. We have to be able to identify or remember what a perfect square trinomial is. Now, a trinomial is any polynomial with 3 terms, 1, 2, 3. What makes it a perfect square trinomial? Well, sorry guys, you got to put up with my singing. Here it is, recorded and ready for you. So if you remember, first, you take the square root of terms 1 and 3, double the product, then you check and see, and if it equals term 2, then you can declare that your 3-term trinomial is a perfect square. There is your perfect square trinomial. So if you remember identifying these, we can take this, take the square root, find the last one, take the square root. If you double whatever 2x times 3 is, so that should be 6x if you double it, and it ends up being the middle term, then it's a perfect square trinomial. This is important because we can take that perfect square trinomial and we can get to our factored form in one step. We don't have to worry about breaking it up into 2 brackets and guessing and testing or doing decomposition or any other method you would have learned. We are just taking this one and putting it down in one step. So we can take our perfect square trinomial and we can put the 2x at the front, the 3 at the back. If this is a plus sign, put a plus. If it's a minus sign, put a minus, and then a little square up top, you factored it. Okay, we're going to need this idea in order to complete the square. Okay, so let's look at our steps. The back of the book, or not the back of the book, your textbook talks a lot about the 2 different forms, and it gives you a very detailed description on page 213. It's got a whole lot of letters and numbers and exponents and square brackets. For a math person, like, I love it. I'm like, oh, it's so clear. If you're not a math person, you're going to look at that and go, what are they talking about? Take your time, go through it. Maybe don't look so much at the numbers, but they have some excellent steps at the side, which is basically this. Okay, so take your time and read it. You can pause the video or load up my PDF, and you've got everything there. I'm not going to read these to you. I'm going to go through them as we do an example. Okay, so let's look at an example. Your sheet should have a whole bunch of different trinomials. I'm going to do one example on this page, and then I'll do one if there's an a value. And that's all we're going to do for today. So we need to complete the square of this guy. Well, the first thing that you realize is you should notice it is not a perfect square trinomial. So we need to force it to be a perfect square trinomial, but I'm not allowed to change the value of my quadratic. Okay, I'm only allowed to maybe change the way it looks, okay, but I'm never allowed to change its value. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to look at the first 2 terms only. I'm not going to ignore or I'm not going to lose the plus 5 at the end. I'm just going to temporarily put it to the side, okay, but I can't forget about it. So let's just look at the first 2 terms. I've got x squared plus 6x. I want to make that a perfect square trinomial. Okay, now remember, I can't lose this plus 5, so let's just put this in. I'm just going to put it to the side for a while. Okay. All right. So what would I have to add here in order to make this a perfect square trinomial? Well, if I take 6x and divide by 2, okay, so remember, this is our b term. If I divide by 2, I get 3. And if I square it, I would get the number 9. Oops, plus 9, positive 9. There we go. Okay, so if I add in this plus 9, this trinomial is a perfect square trinomial, which means that I'm going to do a few steps at the same time, which means I could actually write it as x plus 3 all squared, right? So cool. Okay, this is ideally where I want to go, but I can't just magically add in a plus 9. That's like you having no money in your wallet and then I give you $9. The value of money in your wallet has changed. I'm not allowed to do that in math. But if I give you $9 and take away $9, you still have no money, okay? So we can do that here. I'm allowed to add 9 as long as I subtract 9, because that's the same as adding nothing. And since I'm adding nothing, I'm not changing its value. And the reason that we do this is, again, we're not changing the value of the quadratic. We're just making it look a little prettier, right? It's like Mrs. Belvedere in the morning. When I wake up, you know, sometimes I put, well, I don't put makeup on, but maybe you put some makeup on in the morning or you do your hair, right? We're making you look a little different than the way you woke up. Otherwise, I would really scare you in the morning. So this is my first two terms. I take my middle term, divide by 2, and square it to get this third term. This is a perfect square trinomial now, but I can't add 9 unless I subtract 9. So I'm going to subtract my 9. I also can't forget about my 5. Okay, so these 3 terms I can complete the square with. So these 3 are going to become x plus 3 squared. But I am still left with the minus 9 and the plus 5. So since I'm left with these two, I have to collect them. So I'm going to group them together. Let me just do it this way. And if we group negative 9 and positive 5, well, negative 9 plus 5 is negative 4. And if you take a good look at this, oh my goodness, look, it looks like it's in vertex form. We now have a quadratic in vertex form where your vertex is, remember the signs are opposite, -3, -4. Okay, I'm sure you want to see lots and lots more examples. You can pop onto YouTube and find a ton more. Doesn't matter which ones you want to look at. I want to show you one more example of when there is an A value. Okay, now don't forget, guys, anytime that you need, just rewind my videos and rewatch them and see if that helps you out a little bit if you've missed any steps. Okay, so we're going to do the same method. I want to take this quadratic here and I would like to turn it into vertex form. Before I can do that though, in order to do that, I need to complete the square. So I have to first start looking at these first two terms. So I've had some teacher friends, and sometimes I teach it this way as well. The first thing that we do is we put brackets around the first two terms. Okay, and this helps us identify the two terms that we want to deal with in order to complete our square. Now this is going to be really ugly, okay, but that's okay. We're going to deal with an ugly example. Okay, we're going to have some decimals in here, and that's fine. Okay, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to factor out or common factor a 2. Only the number, leave the letters alone. Okay, so we're going to factor out a 2, and I should be left with x squared. Oops, there we go. If I factor out a 2 from this guy, I should be left with x squared. And if I factor out a 2 from this, remember factoring is the same as dividing. I should have 3 divided by 2. I would prefer a fraction, but guys, please use a decimal. 3 divided by 2, it's 1.5, okay? So we get 1.5x. Now again, I can't forget about my -7. I have to keep it around. So I'm just gonna put it to the side. I'll deal with it in a few minutes. Now that I've got my brackets for the first two terms of my quadratic, those are the two that I'm gonna use to complete, that I'm going to make a perfect square trinomial. So again, let me just copy. Oops. There we go. So I need to add some number, but I can't just add a number. I'm also going to have to subtract whatever that number is. There we go. And now I've got to figure out, well, what number do I put in to make it a perfect square trinomial? Like this, it's a decimal. What am I supposed to do? Don't worry, you're going to use this formula, this b over 2 squared, So take 1.5 and divide by 2, okay? And if you're not great at it, I don't care, use a calculator, okay? 1.5 divided by 2 is 0.75. 0.75 squared, it's a whole bunch of decimals. That's fine, it's decimals, that's okay. Now, when I plug it in, I got 0.5625. There we go. It hates me today. Let's try this one more time. Get rid of that. Cool. There we go. 0.5625. There we go. 5625. So there's the x squared minus 1.5x. Now I'm going to add 0.5625 and I'm going to subtract 0.5625. Okay, this is the one that I would need to make a perfect square trinomial. This negative 0.5625, I don't want it there anymore. I need it to get out of the brackets. But before I just get rid of it, I have to remember that this 2, let's just put this in here, this 2, that 2, there we go. Wow, I'm sorry guys, I'm a little off today. Here we go. This 2 applies to everything in the brackets, including this last term. So if I pull 0.5625 out of my brackets, I have to remember that it's supposed to get multiplied by 2. Okay, so when I pull it out, you have to multiply it by this a term. Okay, for the first few times that you guys do these questions, rewatch the video and go step by step. So I'm going to take this negative 0.5625 out of the brackets, and when I do, I'm going to multiply it by 2, and I should get negative 1.125. Okay. This part here is the one that I want to make my perfect square trinomial. Oops. I think my keys are sticking. There we go. So this part right here, I want to make my perfect square trinomial. So 1.5 divided by 2 is 0.75. And my squared comes on the outside. Okay, so this trinomial is a perfect square trinomial. To get it into your brackets, it's the a value divided by 2, or sorry, the b value divided by 2 to get this. My 2 stays out at the front. I put my square down because now I have changed this to the perfect square trinomial, the factored form. And now I'm left with these 2 terms at the end, which I can add. So negative 1.125 minus 7 should be negative 8.125. Okay, and you have completed a square of a trinomial that is not pretty. It's got decimals and a values. But you still can do it, okay? It is the same process and the same steps, okay? Take your time. Your textbook has lots and lots of examples with little steps at the sides. Please look at those examples. They can also help you. YouTube has a ton of examples also. So you can use my videos, pause them, rewatch them, use other sources on the internet, and then you only have a few questions to practice from your table of contents, okay? Good luck, guys, and we'll see you for the next section.